How to use the AP Stylebook. I have a lot of students who ask me, how do I use this? I've never seen this book before. I'm not familiar with it. And let me just say, if you're new to journalism or you've never looked at this guide before, never even heard of it, you're not alone. And it can be very intimidating and frustrating when you're first starting out. And let me just say, even if you've been using this book for a while, it can be it can be frustrating at times. So you're not alone. But let me introduce you to the basics of how to approach this reference guide. First of all, what is the AP Style Guide? The AP Style Book is the standard manual of how to write everything journalistically, from dates to titles to addresses and so on. It is the journalist's Bible. Now, obviously, the Bible is on a higher level. It's life-changing, it's life-giving, and the AP Style Guide doesn't live up to that. But if you are going into media as a career, this is the guide that you want to internalize, that you want to refer to continually in anything that you do. And now, other outlets like the New York Times and the Washington Post, some of the bigger media companies like that, might have their own standard style guide. But for the most part, across the industry, this is the standard, gold standard for your reference and how to write things. This was first developed by the Associated Press, which was founded in 1846, and it details everything from A to Z. It is routinely updated to reflect the latest changes in writing style. Now, over the past several years, there's been a lot of changes as the internet has exploded, as social media has exploded on the scene. So a lot of things of how we write things have kind of changed, and that's why it's updated frequently. So if you're going into this industry, you might want to consider the online subscription because that is updated more frequently. But for the most part, this guide should be sufficient for you throughout your time in this class and beyond. It is often referred to as the AP Style Guide, the AP Style Book. So if you hear me say AP Style Guide or AP Style Book, it is the same thing. How to use the Style Book. This works like a reference manual, so you don't need to memorize anything. This is it's here for you to look things up. Now, the more you use it, the more familiar you're going to be with terms that you may not even need to look up anymore. But you don't need to memorize it. Everything is listed in alphabetical order. It has a main section and it has different beat sections such as sports, food, fashion, business, and religion. So if you don't see something in the main section, you may want to consider that it's in a different section, especially if you're covering a specific area like sports or business or religion. It also includes a media law briefing. As a journalist in any media industry, if you're going into public relations, you need to be familiar with media law. Now, this isn't comprehensive, but it gives you the basics that you need to know to avoid getting into trouble. It also, more recent books, the more recently updated books, and your books should have the social media guidelines. With social media, it's no longer just the wild, wild west. There are guidelines to follow when you're using social media. And another important area that I want to draw your attention to is also the punctuation guide. A lot of times you may have a question of how do you punctuate, especially if you're putting something in quotes. Does the period go inside the quote? Does a question mark go inside the quote? Does the comma, how do I punctuate this? Refer to your punctuation guide. That's a very important section for you to be familiar with, especially if you're first starting out and are really not familiar how to use it. It works a lot like a dictionary or an encyclopedia where everything is listed in alphabetical order by term. Now the key is trying to figure out what term you need to look up. It's not exhaustive like a dictionary, but there are key terms that you will need to look up, but everything is in alphabetical order. Explanations are given. There's examples often on many entries that explain how to use the word in certain situations. If you look at the beginning of your book, in the first few pages is a Stylebook Key, and this breaks down how to use the different entries in this book. Now, not every entry will have an explanation or an example provided. Sometimes they just give you the correct way to spell it. Sometimes it includes, does it include a space in between the two words? So are the two words together? How do you abbreviate certain words? And so those one-word entries are simply telling you how it should look. So take a look at that style key. It breaks down the different parts for you. So here's the meat and potatoes of what you need to know as you're approaching this book and as you're working on your quizzes or your papers. This guide, again, can be intimidating for the beginner, but again, with patience and practice, it does get easier. The more you use it, the more you remember what terms are common to look up and what areas that you need to look up. And often you'll remember how certain things are notated. I've been doing this for more than 20 years, or certain areas that I'm familiar with, and I just know how to notate it in AP Style. I don't always have to look it up. But I want to say, even editors that have been in this business for years, they still go back to this guide. They don't have everything memorized, and they need to go back and look it up. Even stuff that might seem very familiar with them, often they'll go back and look it up just to double check. So look up things by term. If you're looking at your sentence, look up the keywords in each sentence. It takes patience, it takes detail, but you need to look up those keywords by term and see how to actually write it correctly. Look up by categories, abbreviations, states, date lines, numerals. Those will break down the different types of situations where you want to use a number versus spelling it out. Review the examples provided to understand the proper usage of the term. They'll give examples, and you should be able to take that example and pretty easily apply it to your situation. Sometimes in an entry they'll have a cross-reference. Maybe the example didn't quite give you what you needed, or the word didn't really have an explanation, but sometimes they'll say see state titles or see date lines, and that'll tell you to go look up that word. Now, this is where sometimes students get frustrated. It's like, I looked up a term, but it wasn't there, or it didn't tell me what I needed to do. Often you have to think a little bit differently. Okay, what is an alternative word, or what is an alternative category that I can look up that will give me the answer I'm looking for. Again, this takes practice, and this takes patience, and takes persistence. But you can look up what you need. Look up every proper noun. Look up capitalized words, or if a word looks like it should be capitalized but it's not, look it up. Any confusing points of grammar, you can look that up. Perhaps you're not, you get confused all the time over effect versus effect. You can look that up. Look up your punctuation, as I just said a few minutes ago. There's a punctuation guide in the back. The bottom line is to look it up. If you're not sure, if it's a big word, it's a keyword, look it up. And be patient and persistent. And again, with practice, you will succeed at using this guide, and you will become more familiar with it, and it will get easier. And again, if you have any points that you're not familiar with, or you're not sure, you can always email me, contact me, and I'm happy to clarify those points for you.